Life is not a journey from cradle to grave, but an exploration from infinity to infinity. This phrase captures the essence of what we'll explore today, delving into the depths of an idea that challenges our conventional understanding of existence, the notion that you were never born and will never die. Imagine for a moment that everything you believe about your birth, your life, and your eventual death is an illusion, an elaborate construction of the mind, a dream from which we haven't yet awakened. Sounds impossible? Brace yourself for a journey that will challenge your most fundamental perceptions about reality and who you really are. In the West, we're accustomed to thinking in linear terms. We're born, we live, and we die. But what if I told you that some of the world's deepest philosophical and spiritual traditions view existence in a radically different way? A perspective that not only questions the beginning and end of life, but the very nature of the self that supposedly lives this life. Throughout this video, we'll explore a revolutionary idea that has the power to completely transform your worldview and sense of self. But before we dive into this concept, we need to understand the roots of this perspective and how it has developed over millennia. If you've ever wondered about the purpose of life, if you've ever felt there's something more beyond the common narrative of birth, life, and death, or if you're simply seeking a deeper understanding of your own existence, the ideas we'll discuss today may offer profound and transformative insights. Let's begin our exploration with one of the oldest and deepest traditions that address this question: Buddhism. Picture the young prince Siddhartha Gautama living a life of luxury and comfort within the walls of his palace. One day he decides to venture out and encounters the reality of human suffering. This encounter leads him on a quest for truth that would culminate in his enlightenment and the birth of Buddhism. Over 2,500 years ago, the Buddha proposed a revolutionary idea known as anatman, or anatta, which means no self. This isn't just an abstract philosophical theory, but a profound realization that, according to Buddhism, can be directly experienced through meditation and inner inquiry. Buddhist scholars and practitioners over the centuries have explored and refined this concept. The Dalai Lama, one of the most respected figures in contemporary Buddhism, often speaks about the illusory nature of the self and how this understanding can lead to profound freedom. But what exactly does it mean to say there is no self? At first glance, this might seem absurd. After all, we have our thoughts, memories, and experiences. However, Buddhism invites us to look closer. When we try to locate this self, where do we find it? In our thoughts. They're always changing. In our body. It's also in constant transformation. In our consciousness, it too is a continuous flow of experiences. Take a moment and try to find in your immediate experience something that is permanent, unchanging, and that can be called self. Can you? This investigation leads us to an even deeper question. If there is no permanent self, what exactly is born and what dies? Keep this question in mind as we continue our exploration. The understanding of no self in Buddhism isn't just a philosophical idea, but a practice. Through meditation and mindfulness, Buddhist practitioners seek to directly experience the impermanent and interconnected nature of all phenomena, including what we call self. You can start exploring this idea in your own life through a simple observation practice. For a few minutes each day, observe your thoughts, sensations, and emotions without identifying with them. See them as passing phenomena, like clouds in the sky. Over time, you may begin to notice that there's a consciousness aware of all this, but it isn't any of these things. This Buddhist perspective fundamentally challenges our Western notion of identity and individuality. It suggests that our search for a permanent, separate self is the root of much of our suffering, and that liberation comes from understanding our interconnected and impermanent nature. Interestingly, this Buddhist view finds echoes in some of the most recent discoveries in quantum physics. The idea that, at the most fundamental level, reality is an interconnected web of events and relationships, rather than separate and independent objects, resonates with the Buddhist view of interdependence. But Buddhism isn't the only tradition that explores these profound ideas. There's another school of thought, originating in India, that takes this understanding to an even more radical level: We'll explore this perspective soon, but first, let's consider the practical implications of the Buddhist view for our daily lives. What would it be like to live with the deep understanding that there is no separate, permanent self? How would this affect our relationships, our ambitions, our fears? And more importantly, how would it change our relationship with the idea of birth and death? Zen master Shunryu Suzuki once said, "You are perfect exactly as you are, and there is still room for improvement." This apparent contradiction beautifully captures the essence of the Buddhist view. There is no fixed self to perfect, and yet there's an infinite path of growth and transformation. Many practitioners report that as they deepen their understanding of no self, they experience an increasing sense of freedom and connection. The weight of self-importance diminishes, and a deeper appreciation for the beauty and interconnectedness of all life arises. Contemporary figures like Eckhart Tolle and Adyashanti have popularized these ideas in the West, showing how dissolving identification with a separate self can lead to profound peace and clarity. By exploring these ideas, you're not just expanding your intellectual knowledge, but potentially opening the door to a profound transformation in your life experience. The understanding of no self might be the key to a freedom you didn't even know was possible. Here's a paradox to contemplate. The more deeply we understand that there is no separate self, the more fully we can live and express our uniqueness. It's as if by letting go of the idea of who we think we are, we become more authentically ourselves. Now, let's take a step further and explore another tradition that takes this understanding to an even deeper level. Advaita Vedanta. If Buddhism challenges us to question the existence of a permanent self, Advaita Vedanta goes even further. This philosophical school of Hinduism not only questions the existence of an individual self, but proposes that the only true reality is a universal consciousness known as Brahman. Imagine a vast, infinite ocean. Now, imagine that each wave in that ocean believes itself to be a separate entity, with a beginning and an end. Advaita Vedanta tells us that we are like these waves, mistakenly believing in our separation, when in fact we are temporary manifestations of the infinite ocean of consciousness. This tradition, with over 1,400 years of history, has been explored and refined by countless sages and philosophers. One of its best-known exponents, Adi Shankara, lived in the 8th century CE and systematized many of the teachings that form the basis of modern Advaita Vedanta. Contemporary figures like Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj brought these ancient teachings to the modern world, influencing thinkers and spiritual seekers across the globe. Advaita Vedanta proposes that our true nature is Brahman, universal consciousness. What we perceive as individual reality, our thoughts, emotions, body, and world, is actually an illusion created by Maya, a veil that obscures our true nature. Pause for a moment and consider, what if everything you consider to be you, your thoughts, memories, personality, were just temporary appearances on the vast canvas of consciousness? How would this change your perspective on life? This view raises an intriguing question. If our true nature is universal consciousness, what happens when the body dies? Keep this question in mind as we continue our exploration. In Advaita Vedanta, realizing our true nature isn't just an intellectual understanding but a direct experience. Practices like self-inquiry, proposed by Ramana Maharshi, aim to lead the practitioner to a direct experience of their true nature as pure consciousness. You can explore this idea through a simple practice. For a few minutes, turn your attention to the consciousness that's aware of your thoughts and sensations. Who or what is aware? Can you find the boundaries of this consciousness? The Advaita Vedanta view challenges not just our notion of individuality, but our entire understanding of reality. It suggests that what we perceive as a world of separate objects is actually a single manifestation of universal consciousness. Interestingly, this non-dualist view finds parallels in some interpretations of quantum mechanics, which suggest that at the most fundamental level, reality is indivisible and interconnected. But how do these ancient ideas relate to contemporary philosophical thought? Are there modern philosophers exploring similar ideas? We'll address these questions soon, but first, Let's consider the profound implications of the Advaita Vedanta view. If our true nature is universal consciousness, what does this mean for our daily lives? How does it affect our understanding of birth and death? And how can we live in a way that honors this understanding? Ramana Maharshi said, "Your own self-realization is the greatest service you can render the world." This statement captures the essence of Advaita Vedanta, the idea that by realizing our true nature, we transcend the limitations of the ego and become one with everything. Many who deeply explore the teachings of Advaita Vedanta report a profound shift in their life experience. There's a growing sense of peace and freedom as identification with the ego diminishes and the understanding of the underlying unity of all existence deepens. Modern figures like Rupert Spira and Mooji have brought the teachings of Advaita Vedanta to a global audience, showing how this ancient wisdom can be applied to contemporary life. By exploring these ideas, you're opening yourself to an understanding that has the potential to completely transform your life experience. Realizing your true nature as universal consciousness might be the key to a freedom and peace that transcend all external circumstances. Here's a paradox to contemplate. The more deeply we realize our oneness with everything, the more fully we can appreciate and celebrate our unique expression. It's as if by transcending the ego, we become more authentically ourselves. Now let's take a leap into the world of contemporary Western philosophy and see how these ancient ideas find expression in modern thought. You might think that ideas as seemingly esoteric as no self and universal consciousness would be alien to Western philosophical thought. Surprisingly, some contemporary philosophers are exploring remarkably similar concepts, albeit from a more scientific and materialist perspective. Imagine a neuroscientist in their laboratory, observing brain activity on a monitor. They see patterns of neural activity that correspond to thoughts, emotions, and sensations. But where in this complex network of neurons is the self? This is the question that some contemporary philosophers are asking. In recent decades, with the advancement of neuroscience and artificial intelligence, there has been a resurgence of philosophical interest in the nature of consciousness and self. More than 20,000 academic papers on consciousness have been published in the last decade alone. Philosophers like Thomas Metzinger, Daniel Dennett, and Susan Blackmore have proposed theories that challenge our conventional notions of self and consciousness, echoing in some ways the ancient traditions we've explored earlier. Thomas Metzinger, for example, proposes that the self is a kind of simulation created by the brain. It's not a real entity, but a very convincing model that the brain creates to navigate the world. This idea, known as the ego tunnel hypothesis, suggests that our experience of being a unified and continuous self is a useful illusion, but an illusion nonetheless. Think for a moment. If your sense of self is a construction of the brain, something that evolved for its practical utility but not a fundamental reality, how does this change your understanding of who you are? This perspective raises fascinating questions. If the self is a construction, what exactly is born and dies? And how does this understanding affect our view of life and death? While these philosophical ideas might seem abstract, they have profound practical implications. Understanding the self as a construction can help us relate differently to our thoughts and emotions, seeing them as mental processes rather than absolute truths about who we are. One way to explore this idea is through the practice of mindfulness. Observe your thoughts and emotions as if they were events occurring in a space of consciousness without fully identifying with them. Over time, you might begin to notice a sense of space or distance between you and your mental states. This view of the self as a construction fundamentally challenges our intuitive notions of identity and personal continuity. It suggests that what we consider our essential self is actually a dynamic and ever-changing process, not a fixed and unchanging entity. Interestingly, this contemporary view of the self as a brain construction has surprising parallels with the ancient traditions we've explored. Both Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, though starting from very different premises, arrive at similar conclusions about the illusory nature of the individual self. But if the self is a construction, a simulation created by the brain, what does this mean for our understanding of consciousness? And how does this view relate to the ideas of birth and death we're exploring? We'll address these questions soon, but first, let's consider the implications of this contemporary philosophical perspective. If your sense of self is a useful construction, but not a fundamental reality, how does this change your relationship with your experiences? How does it affect your understanding of personal responsibility and free will? And how does it influence your view of death? Philosopher Alan Watts once said, "You are the universe experiencing itself as a human being." Sorti. This statement poetically captures the idea that our individual experience is a manifestation of a broader process, not a separate and independent entity. Many people report that as they explore these philosophical ideas, they experience a profound shift in their self-perception. There's a growing sense of freedom, as rigid identification with a fixed self diminishes, and a more fluid and expansive sense of identity emerges. Neuroscientists like Sam Harris and philosophers like Peter Singer have explored the ethical and practical implications of these ideas about the self, showing how they can influence our approach to issues like well-being, ethics, and politics. By exploring these contemporary philosophical ideas, you're engaging with some of the deepest and most transformative questions of human existence. This understanding has the potential to revolutionize not just your view of yourself, but also your relationship with the world around you. Here's a paradox to contemplate. The more we understand the self as a construction, a simulation created by the brain, the more freedom we have to consciously shape who we are and how we express ourselves in the world. Now let's tie together all these perspectives, Buddhism, Advaita Vedanta, and contemporary philosophy, and see how they converge to illuminate our central question, the idea that we were never born and will never die. After exploring these profound perspectives on the nature of self and reality, you might be wondering, how does all of this relate to the idea that we were never born and will never die? The answer might be simpler and at the same time more profound than we imagine. Imagine a vast, infinite ocean. Now picture a wave arising on the surface of that ocean. The wave has an apparent beginning when it forms and an apparent end when it dissolves back into the ocean. But the water that makes up the wave was never really born or died. It always was and always will be part of the ocean. Over millennia, countless sages, philosophers, and scientists have explored this fundamental question of existence. It's estimated that over 100 billion human beings have lived on Earth, each grappling with the same existential questions we're exploring now. Quantum physicist David Bohm proposed the idea of an implicate order underlying manifest reality, echoing in some ways the ancient spiritual traditions. He suggested that the universe is an undivided whole from which we emerge and to which we return without ever really leaving it. When we integrate the perspectives we've explored, the no-self of Buddhism, the universal consciousness of Advaita Vedanta, and the view of self as a construction in contemporary philosophy, a profound understanding emerges. What we really are was never born and will never die. Pause for a moment and consider. If your true self is not the body, not the thoughts, not even the personality, but the consciousness underlying all of this, how does this change your understanding of birth and death? This perspective raises an intriguing question. If we were never really born or die, what is the purpose of this experience we call life? Understanding that our essence is never born or dies isn't just an abstract philosophical idea, but something that can be directly experienced. Through practices like meditation, self-inquiry, and mindfulness, we can begin to touch this deeper reality in our direct experience. One practice to explore this idea is meditation on pure awareness. Sit quietly and turn your attention to the consciousness that's aware of everything: thoughts, sensations, emotions. Notice that this awareness seems to be constant, unchanging, without beginning or end. Could this be your true nature? This understanding fundamentally challenges our conventional view of life and death. It suggests that what we really are, whether we call it pure consciousness, Brahman, or what scientists might call the underlying quantum field, is eternal and unchanging, temporarily manifesting as individual forms. Interestingly, this view finds parallels in modern physics. The law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. In a way, we can see our individual existence as a temporary transformation of universal energy. If your essence was never born and will never die, how does this change your perspective on life? How does it affect your fears and anxieties? And how does it influence the way you live each moment? The Sufi mystic Rumi said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." This statement beautifully captures the idea that our true nature is vast and eternal, even as it manifests as an apparently limited individual form. Many people report that as they deeply integrate this understanding, they experience a radical transformation in their relationship with life and death. There's a diminishing of the fear of death and a deeper appreciation for the preciousness of each moment of life. Figures like Eckhart Tolle and Adyashanti have brought these ancient truths into a modern context, showing how realizing our eternal nature can radically transform our experience of life. By exploring and integrating this profound understanding, you're opening yourself to a freedom and peace that transcend all life circumstances. You're touching the most fundamental truth of your existence, that in your essence, you are eternal and infinite. Here's a final paradox to contemplate. The more deeply we realize our eternal and infinite nature, the more fully we can embrace and appreciate the transient and precious nature of each moment of our individual life. As we conclude our exploration, I invite you to take these ideas into your daily life. Notice how your perspective shifts when you remember your deeper nature. Practice seeing beyond appearances to touch the eternal reality that's always present. And now, I'd love to hear from you. How do these ideas resonate with your own experience? What insights or questions arose for you during this exploration? Share in the comments below, and let's continue this fascinating conversation. Remember, the journey of understanding and realization is ongoing. Each moment is an opportunity to awaken more deeply to the truth of who you really are. A unique expression of the infinite, never born, never dying, always present. Until our next video, where we'll continue to explore the depths of existence and the heights of human potential. Thank you for embarking on this journey of discovery with us.